The annual Correspondence Year-End edition of Off the Record is up next. Reflections on the stories that made headlines and impacted your lives. Around the OTR table, Chuck Stokes, Beth LeBlanc, Zoe Clark, and Bill Ballinger. Sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Pure Michigan morning as we're fighting to my out-of-town folks. Thank you for driving in this lousy weather.
It's beautiful weather if you don't have to drive in it.
Huh?
It's beautiful if you don't have to drive.
Yeah, exactly. You can sit with a fireplace and a sarsaparilla. December 20th is the date we're taping this. So let's go around the table. What was the lead story, Chuckaroo, of 2024?
Trump and MAGAs win back Michigan and swing states.
Bethy.
Miscues by the Democrats at the federal and state levels.
Yeah. Election 2024, Trump winning Michigan, but some bright spots for Democrats.
Mr. Ballinger.
Topsy-turvy year ends badly for Democrats.
All right. Okay. That's sort of the same theme, the election and all the others. Now, here's the tough part. What's the second lead story?
I'm going to tell you for a curve. 750,000 people converge on Detroit for NFL draft.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. I'm sure Mike Duggan will appreciate that.
Well, riffing off of that, Duggan running as an independent.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I did election 24, so I can do lame duck for my second.
All right.
Yeah, Michigan Democrats slink out of Lansing after lame duck meltdown.
Okay, how about the lame duck has a broken leg?
Oh, it's more than just a broken leg.
I like that one.
I mean, that's great, but it is more than just one leg.
And there's also psychological problems attached to that as well. But we'll get to that in a little bit, okay? Since, Chuck, you start us out. The Democrats, how did they mess this thing up?
That's a good question. It's a really good question, which I don't think we truly know the answer to.
We got 20 minutes. Go for it.
I think they had figured we will deal with all this in lame duck without any problems, and then they got the lame ducks and the roadblocks came in. I think they figured it was going to be a slam dunk and they would have all their folks in line.
On the election stuff, Beth, how did they mess up?
I think they weren't listening to what people were really interested in. They missed the economic cues of how people were struggling and talked about macro level economics and how things were better without really addressing issues that people were really concerned about. A lot of their ads were abortion focused when in Michigan, at least, that issue had been settled in 2022. It wasn't having the same effect on people. I think from that point, and then also like on a state level, just legislation wasn't moving that people really wanted to see. They wasted months in the House, at least, without having session or without even having committee meetings where they could have hashed out some of these issues. It was just a lot of missed opportunities.
I remember Joe Tate, the Speaker of the House, saying, we're going to run on our record. That was from the year before. Okay, does he not know that the electorate has a memory of about that long? I mean, really?
Well, I think the other thing that we've all talked about is this idea of Democrats not having been in power in this complete control in 40 years.
Yeah.
I remember at the very beginning of session, I think the first week of 23, asking Winnie Brinks, the Senate Majority Leader, are Democrats going to be able to do this, right? Yeah. She said, well, I remember the quote. She said, well, we're a little rusty. Now, little do we know exactly what that would portend. But I think what you saw in that really sort of amazingly robust first 6 weeks, 3 months of 2023 was the repealing, right, of monumental legislation, whether we're talking about prevailing wage, right to work, abortion laws, and a few things of adding, right, Elliot Larson, LGBTQ rights. But once they got through that list, it was sort of like, well, what's the plan? What are the goals? And they could never get an agenda together because you had this sort of party, interesting sort of fight between the more progressive wing, a lot of freshman Democrats coming in, not maybe understanding sort of the rules of what gets put up on the board.
But thinking they understood the system.
Thinking they understood. And then Republicans under Matt Hall sticking together.
Put the wagons in a circle.
Just saying we are going to work as a caucus, which again, let's remember, is easy to do when you're the minority. Much easier.
And I think some of it was they got caught up because it was a big political election year, campaigning so hard in this state for Kamala Harris, trying to keep Michigan blue, and they got so caught up in all that I think they lost their focus. And they concentrated on that, which obviously was a big thing to do, but the details, as Beth said, the bills that the average person that was concerned with, they weren't focused on.
Tim, remember a year ago, we applauded the cohesion and discipline of the House and Senate Democrats, holding themselves together with these narrow 56-54 2018 margins at each chamber and ramming through all this legislation.
The gun legislation.
Everything. I mean, it was incredible. And then what happened? We forgot the special elections and the resignations of 2 members in the House. They were stopped by the Republicans, not giving them any support for 4 months, and they never recovered. They were paralyzed the rest of the year. They didn't get anything done. The one thing they really had to do was pass a budget. They screwed up the K-12 school budget and gave the Republicans ammunition.
They took safety money out of the schools.
Correct.
You've got to wonder whose brilliant idea was that?
They flatlined the foundation grant, which infuriated the superintendents. Republicans used this in key districts around the state. That's how they picked up 4 seats, got control of the House, and guess what? Next year, paralysis. The next 2 years, Matt Hall and the Republicans.
I'm not willing to go that far.
Yeah, well, Whitmer and the Democrats will have to make a deal with the Republicans on road funding, because that was Whitmer's signature issue when she was elected, and she still hasn't fixed the damn roads. And they've got to come up with a solution to that.
Look, the way that this lame duck is ending, it's going to be frosty come January. I mean, if lame duck had maybe possibly ended with some kind of agreement, I don't think any of us really thought that was going to happen. There was a lot of sort of bubbling up, but it's going to be frosty come January. I mean, there is no love lost right now, but it will be really interesting, I think, to see what kind of speaker Matt Hall is going to be. I mean, watching, this boycotting of the past week, trying to stay on message, it is going to be really interesting to see divided government with Matt Hall as speaker.
Well, Karen Whitsett thinks he's great. She says he's a rock. And he's already given the Democrats equal funding in the minority for next year, which is really unprecedented.
One of the things on this economy, Chuck, the point that you raised, is that the polling data was clear. The Biden folks, before he got out of the race, and Ms. Harris picking up after him, was, times are good. Look at the data. Look at the data. And then you went to Mr. and Mrs. Joe Sixpack and said, how's things at home? Wow, my grocery bills, my eggs, my beer. And how could they miss the connection of putting those two together, that telling people things were good when they thought they weren't was not working?
Yeah, they weren't focused on the inflation-related issues that touch every family, regardless of what your economic income is. But I'll be a little more optimistic that I don't think they're going to come to agreement on many things next year when Republicans take control of the House. I do think that they're going to reach agreement on roads, because I think each side has a vested interest in doing it. And I'll give Whitmer credit on this. She has raised the bar on our expectation of what we want to see on roads. We no longer debate whether or not we want good roads. We expect good roads, and we know that when we drive to Ohio or Indiana, they've got good roads, so we're there. Now, the detail's going to be on how do they come to the funding mechanism that each side can live with. But I think, and I think she's made progress on the roads, but I think Bill's right, it's not totally fixed yet. But they'll come to some kind of agreement on that.
What were the optics of incoming Speaker Hall proposing a road fix solution? Well, the governor fill in the blank.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what I'm saying?
That was sort of a masterstroke by Matt Hall, that he came out with a plan first
At
and
first he
pushed
wasn't
it
going to
forward.
do it. He was going to sit on it until the new year.
Well, he had good timing in that sense, and then Democrats later on introduced some array of bills of certain options for funding
Toll
and everything.
roads.
Yeah, I feel like the optics of that were that kind of what Trump is doing right now at the federal level, of kind of taking the reins before you're officially in that position. And I think the optics of that, the optics of Hall, making friends with Karen Whitsett and coming onto the House floor after this historic, chaotic adjournment, I think that will stick with people for a while. And a lot of folks have said, like, there's 28 new members in the House. That's what caused this breakdown. But really, at the end of the day, it was a lawmaker entering her fourth term who ground things to a halt in the House. And I also think, Hall, I think he will work on a road funding deal with Whitmer next year. I think the question is, what will be the price? Because he is not going to do it for free, and he's going to drive a hard bargain.
And I don't know how Joe Tate missed the cue on Karen. She has been controversial before, so somebody should have reached out to her.
This is the representative that went to Washington, D.C. and sat at the table with Donald Trump.
That's right. So somebody should have been in her ear to see where she was on all of this.
She's the Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema of Lansing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us, though, even knowing all of that, had, her basically hiding away in the incoming Republican Speaker of the House office during a call of the House on our bingo cards in 2024.
All right, let's talk a bit about the progressives who came in. The group, what was it, 23 of them? New lawmakers in the Michigan House. Billy, years ago, when a freshman class came in, what were they told by the elder statespersons in the House?
Keep your ass on the leather.
And keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut.
Now, how come the culture...
Manager, this is PBS.
we can edit that out.
Well, you asked me, and that's what I said.
The word was, sit in your seat, open your ears, keep your mouth closed, and speak when spoken to. And, now the culture changed. Why?
Because, I mean, things are changing all... I was just talking about this last night. I think what we are seeing in Lansing, to some respect, is what we are also seeing, like, just throughout the country in workplaces. Like, there's just different vibes right now about the expectation of what you sort of want to commit to in work, what you want to be a part of, rules being meant to sort of be broken, institutions crumbling a little bit. One thing to note, too, that I think was really interesting analysis that I heard is think about also Joe Tate as leader, who comes from a military background and a football background, both of which are sort of these top-down, do as I say, organizations, team players, but also you sort of take orders, right? Like there's a coach or someone above you who says this is what we're going to do, and many members, Democratic freshmen, did not like that, and really in the end sort of rebelled against that.
These progressives kind of represented the elitist mentality that's taken over the Democratic Party at the federal and at the state level. The Democrats have made a Faustian bargain. They have stolen a core of Republican traditional support, the country club Republicans, and better educated, higher income people, but it was a bad trade-off because the Republicans have gotten all the white, lower income, lower educated, working class that the Democrats depended on for 7 decades. And that is a bad deal. Only 1/3 of the American public has a college education.
I actually think, too, in the House at least, this is going to be dissected, right, for many months afterwards. But looking at it, I think there was a bit of impatience with those new members. Especially as they had to run again on a record that wasn't there. So, there were months last year where they didn't vote. Then they lost 2 members. Then there were months where they were at a stalemate in the House. Then they had months off they campaigned on more progressive policies that they felt they were put in Lansing to accomplish. And they weren't able to do it because there wasn't session held. And then when finally they had their chance in lame duck to push it all through, there wasn't the consensus there that needed to be because no work had been done beforehand to get there.
November 5th changed everything. If the Democrats had retained control of the House, you wouldn't have seen what happened in the last week of this year in the lame duck session. You wouldn't have seen it. It changed everything.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. We're starting to see in politics what we've seen, particularly in Southeast Michigan area, in business, and I call it the Dan Gilbert factor. You remember the old Detroit Renaissance? Everybody would come into a room and they would have all these millionaires sitting around trying to decide what they're going to do, and they were taking a cue from either Joe Hudson or Max Fisher. And then you have this young Dan Gilbert come in and said, you know what? We're going to change the dynamics of how we're going to do business in Southeast Michigan, and we're just going to get it done and forget all these meetings and everything else. Take charge. And I think that's what we're starting to see. It's this impatience that you're talking about.
Well, then he also got in the car and drove 70 miles up to Lansing and put his nose into the legislative process. Right. And without Dan Gilbert, there's no no-fault change.
That's right.
Is that a fair statement?
That's true.
I also think that's an area of budding frustration with these progressive Democrats, right? The Dan Gilbert effect, the idea that corporations have a lot of sway within Lansing, are getting a lot of money through incentive programs, and that really ground on them. And I think they found some common ground with some Republicans on that as well. This idea that get these corporations out of Lansing, get them out of our pockets at the end of the day.
Well, we saw some really interesting bedfellows when it came to economic development or anti-economic development votes.
The progressive absconded with the old Republican line and, picking winners and losers and, corporate. Well, they were for the business community years ago. Yeah. What happened there?
You're talking about Democrats, Republicans?
Republicans.
Well, I mean, the Republicans are really the party of small business more than anything now, and they don't like corporate welfare. They don't like winners and losers picking them. They don't. And they find common cause now with a lot of Democrats.
Right, so the U.S. Senate race, Alyssa Slotkin showed that it can be done.
Yeah. I mean, there was a number, I think we said this at the very beginning, there were a number of little bright spots for Democrats in election 2024. Alyssa Slotkin was one of them, continuing Michigan's sort of streak, nearly 25 years of only sending Democrats to the upper chamber in D.C. And then we saw State Senator Kristen McDonald-Rivet winning really what became sort of Trump County, taking over for outgoing Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee. So, but to Chuck's point and what we were talking about earlier, both of these candidates talked a lot about the economy, right? Particularly Kristen McDonald-Rivet. I talked to her right after the election and I said, how did you do it, right? And she said, because I talked about prices of things.
All politics is local.
Yeah, and Alyssa Slotkin, I mean, I think part of it was just you look at the number of folks, Republicans or maybe not even Republicans, just low propensity voters, as we talked about, who came in, simply voted for Donald Trump and then left the rest of the ballot empty, didn't vote for Mike Rogers, right?
Much to the chagrin of Mike Rogers.
Well, yes.
There were no coattails.
There was not a Trump coattail when it came to this U.S. Senate race. And we know.
Look, she only won by 18,000 votes, for God's sake.
You only need one.
I agree. No, I agree, but I'm saying you're sounding like it was a landslide.
Well,
I mean, she barely.
It wasn't a landslide, but
opposed to everything else, it felt like one.
Let me say this. It was not a landslide. But when you consider that Donald Trump, that it's 2 statewide races, right? And Donald Trump wins and she wins, that's what I'm saying is telling.
And someone said to me, if Election Day had been like 2 more weeks away, then Rogers might have caught her. One of the things that I thought he did that was smart, but he did it so late in the game, was the ad with his wife. It humanized him in a way that had not been done throughout the campaign. But what took them so long to bring her on? Because I thought she was really good on camera and effective. Slotkin was smart. She ran a smart race. She got out before everybody. She got out early. She raised the money. She was not seen as this quote unquote liberal Democrat. And the ad that she did about her mother resonated with people in the healthcare system, especially now when we look at the feelings that are coming out that people have about healthcare in America.
Another win for Democrats was picking up a seat on the Supreme Court.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
Yes.
They got a 5-2 edge.
Yes.
But let's not look past the 7th Congressional District. Tom Barrett flipped what had been a Democratic seat,
Alyssa
Slotkin's
right,
seat.
right.
And guess what? The Republicans have a 3-seat margin in Washington, D.C. That seat is one of the 3 that constitutes their margin. McDonnell-Rivet, yes, she won, but that's a marginally Democratic district. I know it. I live in it. It's trending Republican, but it's not there yet.
And give Pete Hoekstra credit for whipping the Michigan Republican Party back into one party.
In a relatively incredibly short period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he said, all right, I'm going to Canada.
Yeah. Which, I mean, is great.
Jim Blanchard, tell me how it works.
Exactly. Somebody get me Blanchard on the phone, okay? I told Mr. Hoekstra, I said, it's a great job. You get free hockey tickets. He said, no, you don't. You do not. What kind of year did the governor have? The book.
Oh, this was, I mean, okay, so let's take out lame duck. Let's take out.
I don't think you can.
Let's do pre and post election. How about that? As, chair of the Biden and then Harris campaign co-chair, obviously incredible disappointment.
Speech at the National Convention.
But so what I'm saying is like pre-election, right? I mean, I don't think this governor has ever seen a year like this before. So she just happens to have this book come out 1 month before the Democratic National Convention.
1 week after Biden jumps out of the race.
I mean, it was.
She was actually accused of timing it. She said,
well, it came out after the disastrous debate.
Yes, I'm sorry,
right,
after the
but
debate, yes.
before he had dropped out. And so, meanwhile, while everyone is reviewing the book, and I mean like New York Times, Atlantic, I mean, we're talking big
At one point,
pieces.
it was number 4 on the Amazon list.
Right. So then Biden drops out. And I mean, all the political oxygen suddenly is who's going to be the VP's Veep. Right?
He had a great year right up until Biden dropped out of the race, and then she began a long, slow descent. Ending in pretty much
getting
disaster
a prime
at the
time
end of the year.
slot at the DNC the last night right before Kamala Harris.
So what? What did she do with it?
Well, this is it. Is what does she get to do with it now?
Referee, man.
I'm not going to dive into that. But I'm going to say I think Gretchen Whitmer as a politician had a great year. I think Gretchen Whitmer as a governor was missing for a quarter of the year.
Well, I think, objects to the AWOL thing. Yeah. Okay, look, governors can walk and chew gum at the same time. I remember Bill Milliken got criticism for going over to the Holland Tulip Festival right in the middle of a critical legislative session. And he simply pointed out, he said, Skuvik, I do have a phone. Okay, I do have a phone. I can communicate.
Yeah, but Tim, if you were talking to some of these Democrats in the midst of this lame duck session, or even in the months leading up to it, there is frustration with the fact that she wasn't there while these debates were going on. Would it have helped? I don't know. Things seem to be on a trajectory that nobody could have derailed. But I will say, there was frustration. And I mean, you've been on the floor when there are tough votes being had, or in lame ducks when things are hitting the fan. And you see the governors. I mean, for me, my only experience is Snyder at the end of his term. But you saw him coming onto the floor during lame duck several times to talk to the caucus, to rally things. It doesn't mean they always agreed with him. They sent him a lot of bills that he vetoed. But he was there. And I talked to one freshman lawmaker, and I was talking about that, and he said, I didn't even know the governors could come on the floor, because he had never seen the governor come on the floor. Wow. So
it is a free country,
It is. So I think it is true, right? She can work from anywhere. She can take calls from anywhere. I get that. We're in a very modern time right now. But I think there was frustration that she wasn't there in person when the legislature was struggling.
Can I
so
just,
much.
to Beth's point, I think you put that beautifully, right? As a politician versus a governor. And so what I'll sort of add to that, which is as sort of a national and then a statewide figure. The national figure was on Colbert, was on The Daily Show, Watch What Happens
Every
Live.
show.
I mean, this is what I'm saying, was on Late Night, was profiled, right? And that's where sort of the conversation, the zeitgeist, Whitmer as sort of brand ambassador for the Democratic Party is. But that's a very different world than the one that the Lansing Press Corps, that lawmakers, that state senators and lawmakers who wanted the governor to step up and maybe try to help and create some order were. And those two worlds don't always talk together. I was talking to a national political reporter who was like, well, what's the vibe about Whitmer and the state? I'm like, it's very different than what is at the national level, at least right now during lame duck.
If you took all the previous modern-day governors and put them all together on their national exposure that they got, there's one person who emerges and beats all of them, and that is Gretchen Whitmer. You have never seen a Michigan governor so much in the national spotlight.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think both Beth and Zoe have summed it up really well in terms of the sort of split in personalities that we saw with Gretchen Whitmer on a national level in terms of her own personal persona. She had a great year. You can't go anywhere in America and say Big Gretch and people not know who the heck you're talking about.
Sit down
but
with
when
her.
it came down to the day-to-day working of legislation, but when you talk about running the state, the day-to-day success in terms of a legislative, there were some miscues that happened.
January
and it's hard to do both at the same time.
January 3, the date that the program with the governor will be on. And to answer your question, I won't. See you next week.
Got the big head. And she
I got to get out of here,
Michigan.
guys. Okay, everybody do well. Okay, catch you later.
Happy New Year.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan Public Television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.